Okay, welcome everyone. Finally, we are live and welcome to this World Health Day. I'm very excited to be with you today, with you all, with our fellows, and with our distinguished guests. Today, we are celebrating, I think, a very special World Health Day because we spent almost 50 years celebrating this day that is reminding us the first inception of the United Nations agency taking care about human health. And we spent 50 years talking about the importance between the connection between health and every aspect of our life. But this year, probably the big topic is a topic that is pretty close to all of us. We're talking about building a fairer and healthier world. And so together with our guests and with our fellows, I hope today we can really highlight the big complexity between every aspect that is connecting us to food, the connection between the health of the people and the health of the planet, the health of our community, the health of the ecosystem surrounding all of us. Everybody is clearly understanding this year after the global pandemic that there is no health if there is no health for all. And finally, the pandemic has been really highlighting what is invisible for many people. And so probably now we have been increasing our awareness about all of those topics. And today, I think we can really explore all of this interconnection. We are going to talk about sustainability in the sense, in the more holistic sense of sustainability. When I'm talking about sustainability and ecology, we try at the Future Food Institute always not to just highlight the ecological aspects that is connecting us to nature, but we are talking about the topic of integral ecology. That is a way to approach ecology from the economic perspective, the business perspective, from the political perspective, from the social and human perspective, and of course, also from the cultural perspective. And so I think that today we're going to touch all of those points. Who's going to be with us? We're going to have four friends, four different voices bringing perspective from their world. And we're going to start with the first friend, who is Yves Turopol. Then I'm going to involve Mark Brand. Yves, she has an expertise being an author, studying millennials, Gen Zs, and the interconnection between food and our life, and our behaviors, our happiness. Mark is going to bring his perspective, working with people in need in our cities, in big cities, and facing the big topic of food justice. Then I want to bring with us the voice of innovation with Danielle Gold, founder of the Food Tech Connect. And last but not least, a very important voice, the voice of the industry that we always want to have with us. Because anyway, if we have to accelerate this transition, we have to do it together. So let's start. And I want to invite with me my friend Yves Turopol, author of Hungry Book. We just ended a very exciting journey because we hosted a series of conversation with our Hungry Book Club, highlighting many topics that probably are going to be interesting for the conversation we're running today. She's a world-renowned author, and she's been investigating the connection between food and a big part of our health, I think. So Yves, please, let's start with your voice.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. I'm super excited to be a part of World Health Day. I guess I'll just share a little bit from my perspective and where I've been coming from. So for the last decade, I've been doing research on young people, their relationship to food, but also with a strong focus on mental health and well-being. And really what I've found is that the role of food is crucial, not just for our physical health, but also for our mental well-being. And over the last 2 years, I've been working with the Foundation Food for Climate League along with Sarah in partnership with Future Food Institute, we founded in 2019, that's now taking these ideas of well-being and health and fusing it with sustainability. And what really gets me up and moving every single morning is the understanding that the foods that are good for us physically are also good for us mentally and good for the environment. There is this beautiful synergy that by eating a greater diversity of super flavorful and nutrient dense foods, we can do right by our own bodies, by our own minds, by the planet. And so on this World Health Day, to me, what we really should be focusing on is the opportunity to be using food as a lever for human health, for planetary health. And I'm happy to go into that, or I don't know, Sarah, if you want to throw out some questions, whatever you want to do.
I want to jump to the second voice to then
Okay.
start the conversation and the question.
Perfect.
We started from the Food for Climate League, and then now we're talking about Better Life Foundation, Better Life. And this is what our friend Mark Brand has been working on for the last decade or so. So with Mark, we have been doing many experiences, and every time when he's talking to our community, our young leaders, our innovators, he's really touching those dots that are moving something in our mind and in our souls, really letting us understanding how deep should be the connection between food and justice. Not when you are thinking about places far from our home, but in our cities where we are all living.
Good morning, Sarah, and good morning, everybody. It's always so nice to hear Eve start the energetic container. And before we do that, it's really important to always know where we are. And so I'm coming in today from the unceded territories of the Snohomish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish nations, the original landholders of what is known as Vancouver, British Columbia. And our work here, like our work globally and our work with you, Sarah, as well, is to disrupt the normative narrative that it is not within our capabilities to make the changes necessary to actually change the systems. We are all complicit in the systems that are hurting our planet. They continue to use poverty as an act of violence, which is what poverty is. Poverty is not just happenstance. It's not because somebody won't pull up their bootstraps. It is a systemic oppression of people who do not have the wherewithal to find their way out. And food is at the absolute center of that system. So until we start to acknowledge truth, till we start to understand why these systems are in place, where they come from, where the original traders were, and to start to really put pressure with our dollars as people who purchase, as people who are becoming more and more conscious about the dire, dire straits that we are in as a population, as people, then we can't move forward. So my work is to help to, first of all, every day, feed people. We feed about 1,200 people here in Vancouver, British Columbia. We train digitally and deliver groceries to people in the margins in Oakland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and the 5 boroughs of New York, where we convene chefs just like this with young children from ages 7 to 15 and help them to understand and discover the beauty of food and their true access to it, to disrupt those norms of conversations like food deserts. I hate that language. That doesn't exist. It exists in the Sahara, but it's food apartheid is the true culprit here. So when we start to understand these things, people have energetic reactions because they're like, is this my fault? You know, am I guilty? And if I continue to ignore it or pretend it's the government's problem or big business's problem only, will that make it okay? And the answer is no. We have to all be part of this solution, and why it's my deep honor to consistently work with the Future Food Institute in the boot camps. And I believe we have 3 coming up very soon. To work with young leaders like the people in the room today who have the opportunity to help shepherd these large industries, government who are way, way over their head. They don't know what they're doing, but they could use our assistance into a future that we all dream of. So happy to be here in the fishbowl today and happy to be amongst so many friends and peers.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I think that the journey we are trying to do together is really showing us that this is the right direction, because I'm seeing what our fellows are doing now around the world, and I'm super inspired by them because they are amplifying our words with actions. So this is really, really amazing. And now let's see. From the knowledge and studies and research, we went into what is happening in our cities, in our communities. And now I want to start to talk about business innovation, how the global ecosystem of food innovators and startups have been tackling these issues in these years. And I think that Danielle, she has a pretty unique perspective. She is probably the first one that started the biggest community of food startup. When we started 8 years ago with the Future Food Institute, we were following her, trying to understand what were happening around the world of innovation. And so I want to start to talk about innovation and what you see in your work, Danielle.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here with everyone, with you, Sarah, and with Eve and with Mark. So a little bit about myself and Food Tech Connect before I get into what I've been seeing. So about 11 years ago, I started Food Tech Connect. We're a community for food innovation. We are best known for our newsletter that tracks all the business tech and investment trends in food. And from when we got started, we've always tried to look at how do we leverage new business and technology models to create a more connected and more delicious and diverse and nutritious and just food system. And you've seen just an unbelievable amount of investment and innovation and new companies that have launched in this space over the last 11 years. I mean, there was nothing, and particularly in the last 5 years. And I'm talking about new emerging companies, but also the incumbents, the large companies, be they, at every part of the food system. One of the areas that I am most focused on right now, I think that especially through COVID, what we've seen is there's always been a moral imperative to do better, but there's finally a financial one that became apparent in the last year. So because of COVID, because of the Black Lives Matter movement, we've seen kind of the breakdown of everything that we held true to be our food system, right? Our global food system. And we saw that all of these systems that were kind of propped up artificially started to crumble. And so I think when we think about innovation, there's been a lot of innovation for innovation's sake. There's been a lot of techno-optimism. There's been a lot of techno-saviorism or innovation saviorism in this space. And particularly where we're seeing that a lot right now is in the plant-based world, in the alternative protein world. And so, one of the areas where we're doing a lot of work right now, both in our newsletter and conversations that we're hosting on different platforms, whether it's through Zoom or through Clubhouse or through partnerships, is how do we think more holistically about innovation, right? And so that is, how do we ensure that the innovation that we're doing is equitable, delicious, diverse, biodiverse, planet friendly, just? How do we think about innovations, the way that we form our companies, right? Corporate structure. How do we think about our supply chains? Are we taking single ingredients and scaling single ingredients and creating some of the problems that we have today with the foods that we're trying to displace or to disrupt? How do we think about scaling systems, right, which are both ingredient systems that are more diverse, more nutritious, but also all of the people who are involved in those local farming economies or local food economies? How do we build more resilience? How do we build business models that are that spread the value, right, across everyone who is involved in the growing, the production, the sales, the consumption, all that whole value chain? So I think we're working really hard because I think that there is now a new crop of emerging companies who are trying to think much more holistically when you think about innovation and what innovation looks like. And so I'm excited to dive into that, and particularly on the health side. Just one other thing to add is there's a lot of work being done right now from the Bionutrient Food Association, from Teak Origin. There are a number of researchers who are working on this to understand our nutrient density, and Greg Shoemaker and Dan Kittredge from the Bionutrient Food Association, they will often talk about how we are expressing, but most of our food, at least in the United States, is expressing only 10 to 20% of its nutrient potential. And so you see that all of these things, and that is because of business models, right, that have degraded our soil and different ways that we approach it. So if we start to think about health, and a big part of that is increasing nutrient density and nutrient accessibility, then it comes to this holistic view of innovation and business model development. So anyway, I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and that's just a little bit about my perspective and the work that I've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Thank you so much, Danielle. And both Eve, Mark, and you have been talking a lot about the transition that is needed and the role also of industries in this game. And I think that the industries now are playing a crucial role. And you probably, like me, in these years, you have seen how much there are some industries that are driving the changes. Not easy for them because there are huge commitments, and those big companies sometimes have to move thousands of employees, and they have strong responsibilities. And I'm pretty inspired by those industries that are really trying to transform their purpose into something that is creating tangible impact within the society. So I wanted to have with us the voice of the industry, inviting JC Dalto, who's the president and managing director of Dole in US. And I would love to know from him, because I know the transformation that I'm seeing in the company, but I would love to hear from his voice, really how being in a big company like Dole, they can really take their purpose and through their purpose drive also systemic change, because anyway, they're touching many parts of the society, and how through the systemic change they are doing within the business, they can also impact the broader society.
Cool. Thank you, Sarah. Nice meeting you all. I hope you can hear me well. I would say the short answer is one step at a time, one thing at a time. That is the answer to how. Let me tell you a couple of words about me. I'm new to Dole, so most of what I can share with you, I've been told, although I could prove it, but I haven't done it myself. 2 words on me that could explain why I'm here. First one is I'm from Latin America. I'm Argentinian, born and raised there, lived quite a bit in Brazil. I know what poverty is, but in first person, I would say. It's not that I've seen it, I've lived it. I know what both being hungry on one side or being completely, I would say, obese thanks to malnutrition on the other side is. I know about that. And it's my second time in the US. The first time it was 15 years ago. I was running Danone for North America. And at that time, 2004, when I landed here, we just acquired Stonyfield Farm. Stonyfield Farm is the leading organic yogurt in the US and in the world. And our partner, the minority shareholder and founder, Gary Hirschberg, he's a guru in sustainability. And thanks to Gary, I think all of us who were there at that time started to be positively contaminated on sustainability, which is a one-way journey, as you very well know. So since then, that has shaped and changed my life, and I'm happy to be back now in the West Coast with a new project, which is absolutely in that sense. As you know, Danone became the first or the largest B Corp in the world a couple of years ago. So it's a journey that takes some time, but certainly yields its benefits. At Dole, we believe that good nutrition for all should be almost a human right. And even that, if that's a very presumptuous, aggressive statement. That's what we're working behind. And we define ourselves as a purposeful driven company, and we have defined clear promises that might evolve on time, but for now, just FYI, some of those promises are behind feeding with good nutrition 1 billion consumers, lowering to zero our carbon impact in our operations, or achieving carbon neutrality. ASAP try to get rid to all plastics that are derived from fossil fuels when we start to have alternatives, even if we sell products with drinks inside, like the fruit bowls. We think, and we're almost there in implementing zero processed sugars in all our products, replacing them for natural fruit juices, so no more syrups, although you will still find some. They're in their way to disappearing. And I would say crafting overall shared value, not only for shareholders, which is a must in our business. We need to be a profitable business, but for all the stakeholders around us. So those are examples of our concrete promises. I would say that we have a legacy. We're almost a 170-year-old company that's always been doing good. And now we have to put this legacy in the service of new rules of the game. I mean, good nutrition for all, or sunshine for all, as we say it, is about accessibility. You know, good fruits do not grow anywhere in the world. They grow some places in the world. So you need to find a way to bring these to consumers. Affordability, not everyone can afford certain kind of foods with high nutritional contents. Is about adaptability or acceptability. I mean, when you eat, not all the world has the same cultures, the same tastes, the same habits of consumption. So you need to adapt yourself. And it's about zeroing the waste. We have already very strong projects that, for example, in our plants, we're very close to zeroing waste, zeroing fruit waste. And we're trying to work now with farmers so that they zero their waste into upcycled solutions and products that could be very relevant for consumers. So these are let's say, the hard fronts in which we're attacking our challenge. And then there are other, we might think of soft sides, which are probably the most important ones, which are about developing a new culture in consumers, in population, towards good nutrition. So we have done a beautiful pilot test last year, which we're now expanding to a second city in Baltimore. We have done a great pilot test in Jackson. You know, Mississippi is the state in the US with the largest obesity rate. Jackson is perceived to be as the fattest city in the country. It's a food desert in the middle of the mostly highest developed country. People there don't have basically they don't have grocery stores to go. They need to do 20, 30 miles to hit a grocery store. So we landed there with the support of the mayor of the city, Mr. Lumumba, partnered with the local organization, chefs, retailers, very particularly with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Mississippi, and have developed programs in order to educate the people there on what is good intake of fruits and veggies, going from, and non-related to our business, or also related to our business, but in a much more expensive way, from growing good nutritional products in wherever they can, to choosing grocery options that could make sense, teaching them about the basics of nutritionals. You know that in the US, kids at school barely receive any education on nutrition. So we're doing these kind of things which are very, I would say, impactful for the people we reach, but they're very impactful for us as an organization. They make us, I would say, really vibrate with the cost. It's impressive. I've seen videos. I'm looking forward to be able to travel again to go and see it live. I've spoken with the chairman of these associations that we partner with, and the impact is impressive. And of course, we do not sell more because of doing that. I mean, it's not that we're looking for any, I would say, economic benefit there, but it's part of the mission, part of the cost. So this is one way that I think industry can bring their 2 cents or more than 2 cents to this more fair world with more let's say equalness in good food consumption.
Thank you so much, JC. Actually, when you were talking, I was thinking about the word that also Mark Brand always says. He's talking about food apartheid and how those cities has been designed actually, and which are actually the impacts now we are, say, watching and we are trying to fix, because those were bad impacts that everyone now is trying to deal with. And this is happening in all the neighborhood in many different cities. And it's unbelievable that kids don't have access to fresh fruits, fresh foods. So that's really impressive. And so this is also showing why projects like the Green Bronx machines are so successful, bringing greens in schools and re-educating kids and families to be connected with food. But then I want to now start a little bit the conversation, and then I will leave the fishbowl open to all of you guys. But I want to just start and maybe asking Eve to give us some perspective on that, because for sure, the COVID pandemic will leave the entire humanity with a big fear. There's going to be a lot of fear of connection, people sharing. There are many challenges that we are all going to face, but also the huge number of people unemployed in the world is going to be so tough. So the level of poverty is rising everywhere in the world. I just see the lines in front of the community kitchens in our cities. It's unbelievable. So of course, when we're thinking about educating people, changing our language, the communication, how might we really help the society driving different messages? Because sometimes this responsibility, and also as JC was sharing, this responsibility cannot stand just on the shoulders of the family, or cannot stand on the shoulders of the chefs, cannot stand on the shoulders of the governments, but needs to be a mutual effort. And this is SDG number 17, so partnership to reach the goal, because no one can achieve the goals by himself.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, in large part what Food for Climate League is really focused on, which is democratizing sustainable eating. And one of the things that we have seen within our own research, and then also by culling through research of other organizations, is that people generally believe that sustainable eating is out of reach for them. It's often viewed as something that is elitist, that is expensive, that is inaccessible, when the reality is that sustainable farming practices were invented by our indigenous communities. And it's not being talked about in that way. There are so many different ways to eat in a sustainable manner that are affordable, far more affordable, in fact, than eating your processed foods. There are ways of eating sustainably that are going to be satisfying to you on an emotional level, that will make you feel empowered over your own health and nutrition and well-being, that will allow you to celebrate your ancestry, your heritage, your community, the talent around you. And that will also allow you to feel like you are making a difference for the wider world and perhaps for your community. But that's not the way that we talk about food that's good for you, right? So many of us think that when you're talking about sustainable eating, you're picturing someone often who is white, who is wealthy, who is Western, maybe carrying a tote bag and a reusable water bottle. That's not what good food needs to be. In fact, that's not what good food should be. We need to be celebrating a greater diversity of ingredients, celebrating the terroir, the locality, the seasonality. And, you know, Danielle was talking about, I wrote this down, the 10 to 20% of nutrient potential. I was just shocked by that. That also means it's only 10 to 20% of the flavor potential. which
Totally.
blows my mind. We're living in this food obsessed world that, by the way, crosses socioeconomic barriers because of the internet, right? So even if you by chance you can't access certain foods, you still know about a lot of these things because it's happening on Instagram and on Twitter, and there's still an obsession with food media. But in this food obsessed culture, we're eating a really small number of the fruits and vegetables and animals and grains that are available to us. And that's in large part happened because of the messaging of large industry. So, what Food for Climate League is really working on these days is kind of combating the structure that we have from two sides. First and foremost, we're working within industry to say, okay, food companies, governments, what are you doing that is sustainable? How can we help you better communicate the things that you are doing right so that you're reaching a greater population? And then on the flip side, we really want to work on shifting the narrative from the eaters, from the ground up, to put pressure on industry to make those changes. I think over the last year, we've seen one person can legitimately make a difference, right? And you're talking about food apartheid. I think especially in the United States, we've had, right, the confluence of the COVID-19 pandemic with the Black Lives Matter movement. We've been able to see how racial injustice is so intricately interwoven into our food system. It is not disconnected in any way that the higher morbidity rates amongst people of color in the US, this is really just intimately connected with the racial disparities in terms of food access in this country. So I'll leave it there. I know that we want to get to the fishbowl conversation, but sorry, I'm excited to be a part of this group.
Thank you so much. And now I would love to invite our fellows, climate shapers, food shapers, joining the conversation, because I think that hearing the voices from many different parts of the world, different generations, can really enrich this conversation. So guys, I'll open officially the fishbowl. Be brave and talk.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm Jan Kees. I'm working with the Future Food Institute, but also with the Taste Foundation. So I'm really happy Danielle brought this topic to attention about the nutrient density, because I think we all are talking about food loss and food waste, but we're rarely talking about nutrient loss. And as we all know, the food desert or food apartheid has been also facilitated by the rise of the big supermarkets, where the corner stores have disappeared, the access to fresh foods. But it's a trend that where the supply chain becomes larger or a larger distance from the consumer, then the bioactivity of the produce just decreases significantly, and the preservatives go up. So also what Eve said, thank you for that, the taste is disappearing, and we need to fix that at the end of the process by adding a lot of sugar, and the value of the produce have dropped significantly. So it's, in my opinion, a responsibility for everybody in the whole chain, from farm to fork. But also, I think we need to take responsibility for our communities and really show people how to prepare ingredients and how to cook. Because just if we now magically got back the corner stores again and the availability of fresh foods, people aren't used to it anymore, and they will not definitely choose the right food. So we really need to show them.
I'm curious about what's shifting in industry, because so I'm Amanda. I studied environmental engineering, and I'm really excited about like how systems work holistically. And one of the things that got me excited about learning about the environment when I was younger was the concept of biodiversity, because for me, it was like, me as a human, I make sense. I'm Puerto Rican, Italian, and Polish. And growing up, I just felt like, where do I belong? Where do I fit in? And as I learned about biodiversity, I recognized like, wow, you know, that's so special. My background's so special. And it made so much sense that environments thrive when there is more diversity. And I see that in the social context, I see that in an agricultural context. And I'm curious if industry is starting to recognize that, like, having more diversity in the products that are offered is maybe a wise decision for the future as we think about climate. And it sounds like Dole is making an effort to diversify all of the things that is provided, and maybe has been doing that for a lot longer, and we don't even realize it, because I think of Dole and I think of pineapple. I don't think of yogurt, right? And so what's that like for a large company to diversify, and how are your competitors thinking about that? I'm curious.
Well, I take that on. Well, diversity is such a large concept and so much used for so many different meanings that it's hard to react on that. But all you said is absolutely true and makes absolute sense. And you did a beautiful connection between your DNA and diversity, which I loved. I would say that industry needs to manage a big trade-off. You know, when you're in the world of rights, and let's say rights are typically requested, it's perfect and they're undisputable. Then you have the world of duties and the world of resources. And industry needs to find the right balance in between those. And those balances today, gladly, for companies like us with this vision, you have no choice but to well balance them in doing things right. Why? Because consumers are demanding you to. So there's no, I would say, wouldn't you want to do it, which is not our case? Wouldn't it be in your mission? You would fail. So I would say that today, most of the industries I know, or most of the large companies that, let's say, are the big processors of what we eat, have sustainability very centrally in their agenda. So you just LinkedIn, follow the biggest companies in the world. We all have an agenda to do right, to do well, to do better. And that's fairly new. It has a decade. It has a decade. I was lucky to participate in one of the 2 or 3 that were the pioneer on this, which was Danone. And I don't know if you're aware, but the chairman and CEO of Danone a couple of weeks ago had to leave his job because he was mostly praising about doing things right, and shareholders were asking him, hey, yeah, but we want to return on investments. And it's an interesting conversation. It's an interesting conversation. I think that the more consumers demand, the more companies will be obliged to, if they do not have it in their DNA. And for companies that do have that in their DNA, like us, I would say it's not even a competitive edge, not anymore. It's a must-have. It's a must-have. So if we believe that we're going to sell more because we do things right, and because we do a great show of explaining that, we're wrong. We need to do things right, and right means the best possible manner with the means that you have at that in a precise moment in time. We have to do things right because that's the right thing to do. And we shouldn't expect anything in return, But I perceive that those who do not do it will economically fail, And those who do it, that will be a necessary condition. Probably not sufficient, because probably then you need to differentiate yourselves. Last, on what you said, industry is also responsible for the scale. I remember in my past here, 15 years ago, when we were starting with all these conversations, that then on we signed an agreement with the Clinton Foundation and the American Heart Association to change what would be included in the as food and drinks to be sold in elementary schools. So it was Pepsi, it was us, Campbell's, Kellogg's, and Kraft. And for example, we got rid of the sodas, agreed with Pepsi and Coke that no more sodas at school. They brought in the juices, okay. And the discussion was, would everyone take their dose of fruits and veggies, let's say, recollected in their gardens or in their nearby farms, which is something that would be the perfect thing, yeah? There is not enough land in the world to produce those. So you need to feed 8 billion people at the same time as you need to do things right. So this scale thing is a reality because the industry, the world needs to feed 8 billion people, which is another conversation. Are we too many? So, you know, industry is always in this fascinating for me, in the middle position where you have to balance for me is the key word in these things. And it's fascinating because that balance can be smarter every day. And that balance can be at the same time, you know, intelligent from a business standpoint and very intelligent from a nutritional standpoint, a health standpoint, a basic rights standpoint, and equality standpoint. It is doable. Both things are compatible.
Yeah, and I would just to build on that, because in addition to Food Tech Connect, I also have a consulting business and I work with Danone. I'm actually working with Danone right now. And we do a lot of work around this. And I think, you know, it goes back to earlier is that I are recognizing the need for more biodiverse and regenerative practices and trying to figure out what that looks like at scale is a really big challenge. And if you start down that path, you know, that line of thinking, then really in order to do that, you have to fully rethink your business to think about how do you become a regenerative business. It's not just the supply chain, right? It has to be that you are thinking about, you know, Danone is a perfect example. The investors in Danone, Artisan, right, is not a regenerative an investor who prioritizes biodiversity, for example, or regenerative agriculture. So it's your business model has to be aligned with diversity, and part of it is and you're seeing a bunch of companies that are starting to do this, where they are starting to do long-term contracts with their farmers to convert, where they're starting to think about, okay, if farmers are moving towards these models, if you want diversity, then you need a market for everything that you're growing. And that's been a big challenge. You're seeing it a lot in the fashion industry, actually. I think, there's this regenerative movement where there are these pre-competitive collaborations around doing regenerative growing crops for regenerative cottons, or what you see with the I think it's called Milo, that new mycelium-based thread that Stella McCartney partnered with a couple of other different companies over 3 years of R&D to invest and build out the supply chain, and so I think that we're going to start to see a lot more of that as well. And the imperative is going to be there because, tying this back to the nutrient density conversation, Samsung already has spectrometers, right? They have a patent on spectrometers in their phones. They're already in some phones. Walmart is already doing some trials around variable pricing around blueberries, for example, and around nutrient density, with people showing that they're willing to pay more for blueberries that have higher nutrient density. So this is going to become a liability for companies, right? Because it's not going to just be what you're selling. It's going to be in the next 5 to 10 years, a consumer is going to be, or an eater is going to be able to go shopping, and they're going to be able to scan their food and get a clear sense of here's what the nutrients are, right? And so I think that there are all these things right now that are happening. It's a liability. Look at Deliveroo, right? They just had the worst IPO in nearly 2 decades in London. It was supposed to be the best, and it was because of the way that they're treating their delivery riders, right? So there's all these things that are working, that are starting to happen now, that where I said that there was always a moral obligation to do it, and finally there's a financial obligation to do it. And so that's what I would offer up on that as well.
Thank you so much, JC and Danielle and Amanda. And I just want to say thank you and see you soon to Mark Brand. He was with us. Now he has to leave the conversation. Follow the Better Life Foundation, follow Mark Brand on social media and all the amazing things he's doing with his community. And let's go on for more 5 minutes, because we were a little bit late at the beginning. Guys, I leave you the stage.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I'm in a public space, so I'm wearing a mask. I hope you guys can still hear me fine. Yeah, okay, great. So my question really is, especially in a post-COVID world, one of the things that we expect from a food system is to be more resilient, in the sense that clearly some of the things that the pandemic showed us, a lot of things that weren't working in our food system. And one of the things that I would like to also bring forward in terms of like a really heartwarming story was the story of a biscuit called Parle G in India. So in India, as you know, what you eat is a factor of who you are, what's your gender, what caste are you from, what ethnicity do you belong to, what political party do you subscribe to, etc. But Parle G was like something that was common to all. So in its so many years of existence, only once was the Parle G production stopped before, which was during our independence. And the second time it was stopped was because of the lockdown. And because of that, a lot of ripple effects came across, in the sense that considering that many of the laborers were migrating back, like there was a reverse urban-rural migration, many of them relied on this 3-cent biscuit to give them sustenance, like give them enough glucose for them to like have those longer journeys. So they had to bring it back in production. But at the same time, there was also the rich and middle class part of India, which couldn't do without a biscuit like Parle G, because that is something that we all have with our chai every day. Right. So when we're talking about innovations that come up, especially in developing economies like this, we have these innovations that cater to just the 0.5% of Indians. When we talk about harping onto any of these trends, like Danielle mentioned earlier, like either plant-based or any of these trends. But how do we think about innovations that also, a symbol that aspirational equality that we're talking about, that we probably expect from a post-COVID resilient food system? Daniel or anybody else?
I could just add one concept to what you said, which is, I think, something that will happen. In this balanced world where you have, the rights and the resources, post-COVID, one thing that will come, will resuscitate, and I think will accelerate, is all related to food safety. And paradoxically, typically food safety, the more industrialized you are for long supply chains, the more safe, or the safer you are, because they do already exist enormous amounts of regulations everywhere in the world on what food safety means. So it might initially go against, well, growing in my backyard and eating. And again, I think that if there is one message I'd like to convey today, and probably that's it, is whenever we try to simplify on the blacks and whites, on the goods and bads, you know, we fail. We get nowhere. It's really about how we find the bridges, how we find the balance, how we find the, you know, in the right direction. That's what we need to focus on. The direction has to be the right one. But, you know, there are not good or bad investors. Investors, we need to be grateful to investors who risk their capital to do a venture. And it's no sin if they want a return. So a processed food, which is 3 times pasteurized, is not worse than. Then, okay, let's talk. Did it keep all its nutrients? Okay, if it didn't, okay, then that's not good. But let's not fall into, you know, easy goods and bads, black and whites. You know, between black and white, many people tend to think there are many grays. Well, let's think that between black and white, there are many colors. And let's choose the right color to develop our solutions, managing this world of needs, rights, with the world of resources, elements, tools. And that's where I think if we are just agree on the direction, we will make progress. And the last decade should only make us feel fairly optimistic about this, because the transformations, I mean, I've been out of the US for 10 years, 11 years. I can tell you it's impressive. I mean, seeing it from the distance, coming it from the underdeveloped world where I spent my last decade, and coming from the digging in from the dirt, coming back here, it's impressive. The difference is impressive in the right direction of doing things better, more sustainable, more environmentally friendly. So, I mean, we have good reasons to be optimistic and remain focused on doing things right. And I am convinced that overall the industry has learned that lesson. And okay, some of us will try to lead, to be the flagship of those things. And hopefully we will add our specific value in that sense. I also need to leave you, Sarah, but that will be.
Thank you so much. Actually, this positive message, I think it's really, really invigorating, let's say. So thank you so much. And we do see the same move. I strongly believe that this is the time that change is happening. Let's see if the pace is going to be the right one, because we need to accelerate the change that is needed. So thank you so much. I want to go on for just a few minutes with Alicia, Ivani, Erika, and so on.
Nice meeting you all.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Grazie mille.
Thank
Ciao.
you.
Bye.
If I can add something, JC mentioned food safety, which I believe is a very important concept, but important that we redefine it. We've used to understand food safety mostly on the microbial level of our food, but right now we should actually focus more on if the food that we actually produce is safe food for us on the health and environmental level. And talking from the public health standpoint, and talking from the health perspective in general, I'm a medical doctor, but also specializing soon in public health. I want to say that I do believe that the healthcare system and healthcare professionals' involvement in the whole discussion on the sustainable food system is extremely important. First of all, because of course we all know and understand that climate change is one of the major threats for public health, major threat for medicine in general, but also we do know that we do have some kind of power and authority that we can actually level up this conversation and pull some strings. And we've been talking today about the consumer demands when we change the industry, but we also should remember about the governments. And the governments are also being influenced by, of course, by the consumers or the voters. So as individuals, we should remember about this vote, that we do have this power to change this. And of course, we are talking about a big systemic transformation that is needed, but all this systemic transformation usually start from the very much ground level work. And I think that this is something that we should also consider, but I think it's quite obvious being here in this kind of group of activists and people who actually believe that this ground level work is important.
If I may, I totally agree with Alicia and lots of the points that were raised. Health is really important, as you said, not only at the individual level and environmental level, but also at the community level. So food really can unite communities and increase the power that we have as individual on our daily choices. Really, I really like the image that the money that we spend in the food that we opt for is really like a single drop that day by day can build our ocean together. So really it is the collective power of food that unites all the different inputs from the individual basis, environmental regeneration and care, and also community and culture that belong to us as community and as societies. So I found really interesting also the importance that ancient food and forgotten food have been raising in this debate. So I'm really hopeful.
If I can say a little bit, just last couple of minutes. I think the big question here when we think about food systems is always for whom and where. I think these are the most important things that we have to take into account. Being here in Brazil, we did see again that we have an increase in the last 5 years of 44% of severe food insecurity here in our country, after having left the statistics of hunger for a couple of minutes, let's say. So now we are back down in it, and the synergy has to be taken into consideration, because the pandemic has shown to us, as Alicia mentioned, that the public health has a very intricate relationship with the food systems, and what we eat is what we become, and diversity, as Amanda brought, is important in the food, in our diets as well, to build a resilient body, a resilient microbiome, to make us help us to fight the illnesses better. This pandemic is not the first thing that this has happened. It's actually, it has happened before, but not at this level, and it's not the last one. So if we don't take care of our resilience as a body, our resilience as soils, don't think also on the regenerative agriculture, also rebuilding our immune system based on the choices of foods we have every day, and also thinking about the metabolic diseases, which were the most susceptible people to this disease by far, at least in the beginning. The idea is to make it synergistic and to always be present and see where in your country, in your system, in your villa, in your city, what can you do? What are your problems there right away, and what can you do there? And then we bridge the gaps by bridging little gaps at a time. And I think the one thing that this pandemic showed us is that we have to work in synergy, and everybody doing the best they can where they are.
Thank you so much, guys. I think that your words are always very inspiring, and the need of systemic thinking and cooperation and competition is so much needed and needs to increase. So I thank you for being with us, and I want to ask to Pierpaolo to share his screen and to leave, let's say, the design of what we have been building together through this conversation. year. I think that this month is gonna mark a very important month for all of us, because in the same month we are celebrating the World Day celebrating health and the Earth Day. So in the same month, today and on the 22nd of April, we're going to talk about the health of people and the health of the planet. That also, after I'm watching the card of what we have been saying through this conversation, it's coming up as the crucial need. We all are understanding that sustainable food is only so if we assure health for the people and if it's affordable for all, regardless gender, regardless race, nationality, income, and education. And this is pretty tough. And there is no health without fairness. So we have really to work together to make all of this happen. I invite you to follow the marathon on April 22nd for Earth Day, the Food for Earth Day, where we're going to talk and expand even more for 24 hours this topic. And I want you all be part of the conversation. And I invite you to join the World Dialogues that are running all around the world, because this year, it's clear that we have all to focus on fixing the world system, the world food systems, and join the food system dialogues that are happening everywhere. Be part of the conversation, show what are you doing on the ground, show your action. So we're going to meet up soon again. Thank you so much for being with us and for contributing this conversation, and see you soon on April 22nd for Earth Day, for Food for Earth. Thank you. Ciao.